Welcome back to Torn Book Club, finally. After a number of false starts, we're finally back. And we got some folks in the chat. And so before we get into which is Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke. You may have seen at the head here was the trailer for the sci-fi miniseries that's going to be coming out in December to sort of give you a little bit of a taste of what this story is for those who haven't read it. Got my copy here. But I wanted to talk very briefly about the false starts that we've had over the last month or so, and the crashes, and the bit of lag that we've had with our normal discussion of the Silmarillion, which will continue next week with a. It will continue next week with a much with a very large episode to sort of make up for the lost time. So next week we'll be back to the Silmarillion, and we'll be discussing 3 chapters. It's going to be a big one. Let's bring up the chapter list here. We're going to be discussing the next 3 chapters, which are of the Return of the Noldor, of Beleriand and its realms, and of the Noldor in Beleriand. It's a lot of stuff to cover, but not as much as you may think. Especially Beleriand and its realms is mostly geography and where everybody is ends up going. So we can get through that kind of quickly and focus on the bigger story, which is about to get a whole lot bigger. But for this week, we are talking Childhood's End, which was our May book of the month. I noticed some people have read it, some haven't. And that's okay. Aravandi's saying, I didn't read the book, but I read the plot summary on Wikipedia. It's just not my kind of thing. And that's totally fine. Everybody has their tastes. Me personally, I freaking loved this book. But I'm a big sci-fi nut. And those of you who know that about me at this point know that, or who know me at all at this point know that I am quite the sci-fi nut, and this one spoke to me in a big bad way. So I'm looking forward to talking about it. I did have to go through getting a lot of new software for the show, which I've gotten and I've worked on, and now have a good sense of it. You'll notice most things are gonna look the same. A couple things may change here and there, but it's essentially going to be the same show. Not going to have the same issues that we had before with too many graphics crashing the system with all the visual aids from last time. Because I'm going to be doing it a different way. Takes a little bit more work, so I don't really have too many prepped for Childhood's End, mostly because there aren't that many illustrations of it to go around, at least none that are not incredibly spoilery. But I do want to mention, before we get into it, that we are going to be talking spoilers in this, and big ones. So if you haven't read the book, but you're planning to, you might want to tune out a bit and maybe come back next week when we're discussing the Silmarillion. Or if you want to wait until the sci-fi miniseries comes out in December, also probably good to maybe tune out and come back next week. Because we are going to get into spoilers, and there are some big ones in this, because this book sets up a couple of different mysteries. As you might have seen from the trailer at the start, the 2 big mysteries are, what do the Overlords look like, and what are their plans? Both of which we're going to talk about. So Like I said, I absolutely adored this book. I read it twice, and it made me cry both times. That's the kind of sci-fi dork I am. So so let's get into it. Let's get into Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke. Now, I should start by saying that this was his first book, and it was written in 1953. So it sort of has like that 1950s sci-fi sensibility to it. It doesn't really have a whole lot of strong female characters in it. It's mostly guys, but it one thing that is interesting is that one of the main characters, and one who turns out to be one of the more significant main characters towards the end, is a black man, which I don't know if they're going to be doing in the sci-fi series or not. But we'll we'll get into that, and we'll just start with the story itself, because it begins at the start of what at that time was sort of a hypothetical space race between Russia and America. Like the space race, I think in '53 had only just begun, or was in its very early stages. And in this, it begins with the moonshot, which is still, what was it, 16 years into Clarke's future at this point, and he actually predicted this to happen around 1975. So history actually beat him a little bit. But it's also a much more intense space race and a much more intense moonshot, because you have both America and Russia launching rockets at pretty much the exact same time. So it's pretty much like going to be a neck and neck race to the moon. And we're focusing on the two engineers who developed the technologies, and they were old friends in World War II. One decided, after they were liberated from their prison camp, one decided to go with the Americans, one decided to go with the Russians, and then they are forever enemies now. So, so they're getting ready to launch, and then all of a sudden, a bunch of spaceships show up. And these spaceships are basically just hovering there, and it ends with the engineer for America basically just throwing in the towel and going, okay, there's no more need for any of our technology anymore, because we've just been visited by somebody who's got technology way bigger than ours. So throw in the towel, space race. And from there, we then transfer into the main story, which is several years later, and the occupants of the spaceships have made contact through radios and through TVs in the voice of their supervisor, whose name is Karelin. And the human race has begun calling them Overlords, because they're kind of like benevolent tyrants. They want us to stop all nuclear development, and they want us to stop any cruelty to animals, and basically they're trying to sort of forcibly coax us into coexisting with one another in a couple of interesting ways. There's a section of the story in South Africa where there's a lot of racial tensions happening, a lot of violence happening, and The overlords combat this by telling them, get along or we will blot out the sun over your country. And that's exactly what they do. They're able to use their technology to completely block the sun from South Africa, and to sort of force them into talking to one another and putting aside their differences. And so it sort of feels like a bit like tough love for the human race. When they try to enforce no more cruelty to animals, they do it by they do it through a bullfight. When the guy, the matador or the picador or whoever, when they first throw their spear into the bull, everybody in the audience feels it and feels the incredible searing pain of being pierced in the side by a giant spear. And so from that point on, everybody's like, okay, we won't mess with animals anymore. And so it's this very rocky start to everything, with the overlords very, very gently, but at the same time very firmly coaxing humanity into unification. And that enters the character of Ricky Stormgren, who in this book is the Secretary General of the United Nations. And he is also the only person who is allowed onto the Overlord's mothership over New York, to speak with Corellin, their supervisor. Now, he never actually sees Corellin, and nobody has seen what an Overlord looks like. They've simply gotten verbal messages or messages directly. They've either gotten verbal messages directly from Corellin, or Stormgren has relayed messages to humanity. And it should be mentioned that this, you can sort of see where certain sci-fi movies like V or Independence Day kind of took their cues from this, because we have a major ship stationed over basically every major city in the world. The only difference is, unlike Independence Day, they don't immediately blow everything up. They just sit there. So in all this time, nobody has seen an Overlord. They've simply heard from them. And this is starting to cause a lot of tension as Stormgren is trying to put together the Earth Union. Basically, officially through constitutional measures, creating one unifying world government. And this is sort of his life's work, along with working with Corellin to sort of help humanity along. But there's a lot of resistance, especially from a group. I'm trying to remember their name. I think they're called like the Earth Liberation or something like that. I can't remember the name of the group, yeah. And basically they're led by a guy named Alexander Wainwright, who really wants to resist against the Overlords, and he's gaining a lot of popularity. His movement is gaining a lot of popularity. They're not doing anything violent. They're just actively speaking out against the Overlords. And Stormgren is trying to talk with Wainwright to try to see if they can find some common ground. And Wainwright basically says a lot of our problems could go away if the Overlords would just show us what they looked like. And even Stormgren, when he goes up to the ship to speak to Corellin, now I should mention that when he goes up to the mothership to speak to Corellin, he does it in a room with what he thinks is a video monitor or a mirror with a shadowy figure. And so he never sees Corellin face to face. He just speaks to him on a monitor that is obscured. So so Stormgren starts to think, you know what? Humanity has come a long way. This is probably a few decades after the uh, the Overlords first appeared, and he says, you know, we've come a long way. We I'm fairly certain that no matter how weird you look, humanity will deal. We'll be okay with it. And Corellin says basically, trust me, you're not ready to see what we look like. And they start to have a long discussion about religion, and and uh, and Stormgren actually asks him, like, have you, like, you've been monitoring us for thousands of years, so you know the true story behind our religious texts. You know what we've gotten wrong, and asks Corellin, are you ever going to reveal that to us? And he says, in time, you're not ready yet, because part of the resistance movement is still holding on to old old world religions, and holding on to humanity's individuality and how we set our own destiny. And Corellin is basically like, you can believe that all you want. It doesn't make it true, but it's also what you believe, and it's going to take time for humanity to unlearn a lot of these things and to be in the right mental state as a species for the next step in this whole process of unification. And so Stormgren says, okay, maybe humanity isn't ready to see you, but I sure as hell am. And so he devises a plan to go up to okay, I'm totally skipping another plot point, which is this resistance movement that's led by this guy Wainwright. And it should be mentioned that Stormgren is getting about ready to retire. He's he's starting to bring in his replacement and show him the ropes. And it's around this point Stormgren gets kidnapped by a cell of this resistance movement, and they go to great lengths to take him to a place where the Overlords can't find him. And there they begin to interrogate him, pretty much, to learn everything he knows about the Overlords, to try to find some sort of weakness or some sort of insight. And Stormgren is basically like, you can question me and interrogate me all you want, and I will tell you everything I know, but it's not going to amount to much. Because, of course, when people start coming up with ideas and conspiracy theories, they think that somebody in a position like Stormgren, who is the only human who has access to the Overlord ship, he has some inside information that could help us fight them. He doesn't. But all the same, they've brought him into this area to try to coax some information out of him, and he tells them everything he knows. It doesn't really amount to much, though. And it's while he's in this they're basically in like an underground bunker. It's while they're in the bunker, Corellin sends some probes down and rescues Stormgren. And now, through this whole rescue operation, which essentially is Corellin using his powers to slow down time around them to the point where everything looks like it's frozen, and Stormgren can pretty much just walk out. And he does. And and then he goes up to the ship to speak to Corellin about what had just happened, and it it basically comes out that Corellin had kind of set Stormgren up as bait to get a lot of the heads of this resistance movement in one area so that he can tag them and he can monitor them. And also to kind of embarrass them. Because now they've lost credibility, and they lose more credibility with the next announcement that the Corellin makes, which is, in 50 years, we will reveal ourselves to humanity. So basically, they're granting the Resistance and Wainwright their one wish, which is to see what the Overlords look like, because Wainwright has said himself, a lot of these problems will go away if you just show us what you look like. And so the Overlords say, okay, fine, deal. We'll do that in 50 years when we think you're ready. And this diminishes the power of the resistance movement, and Stormgren is able to push forward his world constitution and unify the world in one big government. So it's this very weird, convoluted plan to unify the world and to discredit and to diminish resistance. But it works. But at this point, still, Stormgren says, listen, I'm not going to live to see what you look like, and I really want to see what you look like. Corellin is somebody who, at this point, he considers a friend, and he wants to know what this person looks like. So he devises a plan to one day go up to the mothership for one of their scheduled meetings, and bring along a device that is it's kind of like ultra high infrared. It's that would project through the visor screen, because at this point he's deduced that this is not actually a computer monitor. It's actually a one-way mirror, or it's actually a one-way screen. And the Corellin is actually physically on the other side. And so he brings up this device, and he's going to shine it through that like a flashlight, and he'll be able to see Corellin. And so he goes up and he tries it, and he does it. He's able to go up to the visor. He's able to flick on the device and shine his beam through, and there's nobody there. And basically all he can determine is that Corellin knew his plan. He knew that he was going to come up and do this, and allowed him to do it. He just wasn't going to give him what he wanted in return. So Stormgren basically goes back to Earth and lives out his life, never knowing what the Overlords look like. Which then takes us to the second part of the story. The story is broken into 3 parts. The first one, which I just talked about, was called Earth and the Overlords. The second part is called the Golden Age. And this begins 50 years later on the day when the Overlords will reveal themselves. And everybody's very excited about this. Now, at this point, I should warn you, this is one of the major spoilers of the story that I'm about to get into. They reveal a couple things. One, that they don't have a huge fleet of motherships, they just have one. And so all the other ships that have been over Earth for the last 50 some odd years, they all vanish. And the one remaining ship comes down to Earth, to a large field, and they do the whole thing that you've seen in like lots of sci-fi movies, where it comes down to the ground, a large gangway appears, there's tons of crowds all around it, sort of like, try to imagine a scene from like The Day the Earth Stood Still or Mars Attacks, only this is going to have far less disastrous outcomes. And so they go there for this big reveal, and the reveal comes. Corellin asks for a couple of children to come up to the ship to sort of like soften the blow by showing him interacting with children, and he reveals himself, and this is what the Overlords look like. They look like straight up demons. They look like the devil that we know so well. Red skin, black wings, forked tail, horns, the whole bit. And this is why they weren't willing to show themselves to humanity, because they look so much like this image that for most of our civilization's existence has been associated with evil. And this is the big shock to a lot of the world, that the Overlords look like the devil. And it's a very weird scene. And like, even when I first read it, I was sort of like, wow, really? That's a little on the nose, isn't it? But that's what it is. And there is an explanation later on, which I don't entirely buy, but works within this scenario of the story that Clarke is trying to tell. And I Stole the One Ring is saying, "Oh, I didn't see that coming. Poor kids." And it should be noted that the kids weren't scared. The kids were actually like quite fine with him. They were happy to see him. So that sort of shows where we've come as a species. Where we come as a species, that like the younger generation no longer sees an image like the devil as something evil. And Suzanne is saying, "Wait, did Josh just compare the day the Earth stood still to Mars attacks?" No, I didn't compare the two. I just said there's a similarity in one scene, which is the Martians or the aliens coming to Earth and revealing themselves, and that's the only similarity. I mean, other than that, they're way different movies. Trust me. And that was just really to set the stage for this reveal scene. And so, Suzanne, thank you for taking what I say out of context again. So then we flash forward a little bit longer, a little bit further, and after the reveal of the Overlords, Earth enters into what is essentially a golden age, as the title of the part suggests. Everybody basically wants for nothing. We have technologies that can take us anywhere in the world in record time. Excuse me again. The Overlords provide everything, and humanity lives in the lap of luxury, pretty much. And so we're left to our own devices to sort of study what we want. But one of the things that Clarke notes is that when we're living in this very utopian, very lackadaisical, want-for-nothing kind of life, our desire for adventure no longer exists. Our desire for discovery, to find new things, that disappears. see if I can find. He had a great quote in here. Somewhere in here. I should have done this earlier. Well, anyway. So basically, yeah, humanity lives in this wonderful utopia that the Overlords have given us. And this sets the stage for Suzanne is saying no desire for adventure, too hobbity. It is quite hobbity, like just in a maybe not in such a rural setting, but in a we're just happy living our lives and doing our thing and not really doing anything too grand anymore. And so everybody, like, we all still have jobs and we all still do things. And what is Temple saying here? It's been found in psychological research that it's important for people to have at least a little stress in life because it's a motivating force. You just don't want so much that it harms you. And that's true, Temple. And that's sort of what he's expressing here, is that without our need to survive, we basically just don't have a need to grow or to expand. And so it's utopian, it's luxurious, it's also kind of empty. And so this is setting the stage for one particular scene, which is going to be sort of like the turning point in everything. And it's a dinner party. And it's a dinner party that's thrown by this man named Rupert Boyce, who has the job of basically being Africa's veterinarian, which is like the best way I can describe it. I Stole a One Ring is asking, do we still have money? You know, that's not really addressed in this. I would assume that in this kind of utopian world where everything is provided by the Overlords, money isn't really much of a necessity. But anyway, getting to Rupert Boyce. He's this guy. He's basically a guy who runs this animal monitoring station for most of, I'd say probably a third of the African continent, which is basically he monitors everything, and if any animal is in distress or hurting, he's able to send somebody or something or go himself to help. So that's why I call him Africa's veterinarian. And in order for him to do this, he is allowed access to Overlord technology that most people don't have access to. And so when I Stole the One Ring, when you were asking about do we still have money, not in that sense. It's more if you're in a certain station in life that allows certain types of Overlord equipment to be accessible to you that wouldn't be accessible to most other people, that's sort of where the hierarchy develops. And so he has a lot of monitoring equipment that the Overlords have that most people don't have access to. He also has access to certain holographic equipment that allows him to project himself holographically into Africa, in order to make the animal, in order to familiarize the animals with him and what he looks like, so that when he does go there physically to help them, he will encounter less resistance. Temple is saying, why is the porno for Pyro's song "We'd Make Great Pets" coming to mind with the whole Overlords providing everything concept? Because you're really not too far off, and in fact, there's a point towards the end of a Stormgren story where he sort of feels that Corellin looks upon him with the same affection one would look on a very well-trained dog. So that actually is a very fitting metaphor, Temple. And we are kind of like pets to them. Or I should say we're being manipulated in very specific ways that will lead to something else later on. And a lot of times, like, people refer to this as an invasion by the Overlords, but I don't see it that way, and I will get to that when I reveal what their true purpose is. But I mean, at this point, to somebody reading this, you would think this is an invasion, and they are just making us soft in order to, I don't know, turn us into food, or to make us into some sort of slave class. And I mean, that's what I would think too, just on this information. That's not exactly what's happening, but we'll get to that later. But anyway, back to this dinner party. There's a few people who come to this dinner party who we need to know about. There is Rupert Boyce. The dinner party is to celebrate his new marriage to a woman named Maya Roderick. Maya Rodericks. And she's somebody who, even in an age of genetically modified looks and all that stuff, she is still a very striking woman, even with that in mind. And so he's having a dinner party to celebrate his wedding, and also to sort of, show off, hey, look what I bagged. Because one of the things about Rupert Boyce is that he is a show off. He loves to sort of show off what he's got, and he's got a lot. So you have his wife Maya and her brother Jan Rodericks, who will play a big part later on. And then you have another couple, George and Jean Gregson, who are a new couple. I don't think they're actually officially married at this point, but they do get married pretty quickly after this. Aravandi saying, is their true purpose to scoop out our brains with melon ballers and eat them? Probably not with melon ballers, just because that seems like a very inefficient way of doing it. But yeah. no, it's not to eat us. So you have Rupert Boyce, Maya Rodericks, her brother Jan Rodericks, and George and Jean Gregson, and one last member at this dinner party. Or there are a lot of people at the party, but these are the ones who actually matter, or who play a part in this story. The last one is an Overlord. Now that they revealed themselves, they're interacting more with humanity these days, and there is there's an Overlord who I won't say is living with Rupert, but is there a lot, and his name is Rashaveric. And he's there for a very specific reason, because Rupert, with everything else that he's got, he also has a hobby of studying the supernatural and parapsychology. And he has one of the largest collections of parapsychological and supernatural writings on Earth. And the Overlords have an interest in this. Probably just to, like, just to kind of study like human behavior. Like one of the things that that Stormgren noticed a lot when speaking with Corellin is that Corellin considered all of this, everything he's doing with Earth, to be temporary. Like this is only a temporary position. This is a task that will one day come to an end, and we will move on to the next thing. So it seems almost menial to the Overlords, or like this is something they've done many times before and is no big deal. And so with that in mind, Rupert believes that the Overlord's interest in his supernatural collections is just to sort of learn about humanity, like an anthropological study. And but and so the Overlords come to him and say, "We'd love to look at your collection. We'd love to study more about it." And Temple's saying, "I just got this thought about a sitcom about a human and an Overlord being roommates like Laverne and Shirley." And you know what? It actually is kind of funny, and like you say it like that, because there are like some funny interactions between Rupert and Rashaveric. Now, initially the Overlords wanted to wanted to just take Rupert's collection, and he said, "No, I worked really hard on amassing this. If you want to read it, you're more than welcome to, but you got to do it at my place." And so they said, "Okay, fine," and sent Rashaveric to basically go there and read through everything he's got. And so that's where we find him. And Rupert, who is very ostentatious and very much a show-off, he's there calling him Rashy, and basically showing him off to his guests like Rashaveric, an Overlord, is part of his collection, which really is kind of the other way around, but whatever. And there's some tensions. Maya and Jan don't get along very well. George and Jean are in this very they're in a new relationship, so there's Temple just said Rashi and Rupee, the series. I love it. That needs to be a thing. There's some tension between George and Jean because they're sort of getting past the honeymoon phase of their relationship, and George is learning that Jean has a pretty strong interest in the supernatural, while George is much more grounded. He works as a theatrical production designer. And so there's some tension between them for that. And all this finally comes together when Rupert decides to show off again with this special device, which is essentially a very hypersensitive Ouija board. And it's mostly just to show like how these things operate. Like he doesn't have any predisposed or pretense that they're actually speaking to spirits with this thing. Like, he knows psychologically how Ouija boards work. Which is a bunch of people put their hand on the planchette or the pointer, and they ask a question, and usually there is some subtlety of muscle movement that even the person who's doing it doesn't realize, that usually controls it. And so you're not actually speaking to like a spirit, you're speaking to somebody's subconscious. And with this super sensitive Ouija board, which he uses with like a combination of glass and ball bearings, he's hoping that we can get into like some really deep subconscious looks into some of the party guests. And also to kind of just show this thing off to a Rash of Eric, because this is what he's interested in. And um, so he gathers a bunch of people, and it's all them. It's George and Jean and Jan and Maya and Rupert. He invites Rash of Eric to be a part of it, but he's like, "Nah, I'll just sit back and watch if that's okay." Um, so so they begin doing this Ouija board. Temple was saying, I read some research just the other day about the subconscious muscle movement with Ouija boards. Yeah, and I think like that's sort of the accepted. Well, I won't say accepted because there are still many people who believe that Ouija boards really are a gateway to the paranormal and to the spirit world. But I'm of the mind, and I think a lot of people are, that it's more just subconscious muscle movements. Now, now they start doing this, and like they're asking a lot of like very basic, very banal questions, like what's my favorite color? What's that person's favorite color? Um, will it rain tomorrow? Uh, Stuff like that. And this goes on for a long time, and everybody's starting to get pretty tired. And the only person who hasn't asked a question yet is Jan. And so they get to they finally get to Jan's turn, and Jan, I believe it's Jan. It's either Jan or George, but I believe it's Jan. Yeah, it was Jan. So he what is Aravondi saying here? I don't care how they work. I wouldn't touch a Ouija board with a 10-foot pole. Fair enough. I've used them before. They're fun. Um, so anyway, they get to Jan, and Jan asks a very specific question that nobody in the room should have the answer to, and that is, which star is the Overlord's sun? Um, since nobody knows where the Overlords have come from, the Overlords have never expressed that. They've never said anything about that. So this is legitimately a question nobody can answer, even subconsciously. Um, but here's where things get weird. Um, because suddenly things do start happening. Um, the planchette does start moving, and it starts sending out a message. It starts delivering a message, and the message makes no sense to anybody. The answer is NGS 549672. Um, and then after that, as soon as that's done, Jean suddenly passes out, and so this kind of shocks everybody, including Rash of Eric. And then we have a scene that's specifically just between Rash of Eric and Corellin, where Rash of Eric tells Corellin what had just happened, and that he believes that they need to keep a close eye on Jean, that she may be the channel, as he calls it. And we don't know what that means or what that does, but it triggers something with Corellin that, like, the next phase of whatever their plans are is about to begin. And so then we go to Jan, who he's an astrophysicist, and he's very fascinated by the Overlords and their star drives, because while they just have the one mothership, they do have a lot of supply ships that go to and from their home world. And while nobody knows exactly where they go, if you use a telescope, you can see when a supply ship leaves to go to the Overlord homeworld. You can kind of see, like, which direction they're heading off in, because they leave a little trail behind them. And so Jan is the only one who realizes that this answer, NGS 549672, actually refers to a sun in a National Geographic survey of the sky. And so he goes to the old records, and he does this very surreptitiously. Like, he tries to make excuses for it because he doesn't want anybody thinking, like, wondering why he's there, or making it look like out of the ordinary that he would be looking this up, because he doesn't want anybody knowing what he's doing. He doesn't want the Overlords knowing what he's doing. And he looks up these coordinates, and sure enough, that coordinate is for a star that is directly in the path of where these supply ships seem to be going. And so then the bigger question is, how the hell did anybody know that? How the hell did Jean know that? The only person who could have known that was Rashaveric, and the odds aren't likely that he would have paid attention to a National Geographic survey done by humans. He would have had his own charting system. So how this happens, and how it happens in a way that can be interpreted by humans, is a great big mystery. But Jan, this sparks something in Jan's mind where, like, okay, we know what the sun is, we know where it is, now, and he begins to devise a plan to stow away on a supply ship to actually go to the Overlord's homeworld. What he plans to do when he's there, he has no idea. But he decides he's going to stow away in really, like, he's going to stow away in the sculpture of a sperm whale fighting a giant squid. Because apparently one of the things that the Overlords like to take back with them are samples of the various creatures on planet Earth. Now, not actual creatures, like, because they don't allow anybody to kill animals anymore. So, Jan has a friend who has been building a full-size mock-up of what a sperm whale in battle with a giant squid would look like. And he's able to fashion a special compartment in there for Jan to stow away on. And what Jan determines is that, knowing the coordinates of the sun, he now knows how far away it is and how long a trip would take. And he's able to plan accordingly. And this is where it gets weird, because the Overlords, from what he can tell from their star drive trails, they travel at near the speed of light. According to general and special relativity, it is impossible to travel faster than the speed of light. You can travel close to it, but you can never travel faster than it. And so what he determines is that that star is 40 light years away, which means that if they're traveling near the speed of light, it'll take 40 years to get there. And even even if like he gets there, they discover him and they send him right back, it's still another 40 years to get back. So that's 80 years in Earth time. With special relativity, there is a time dilation effect. So what essentially amounts to a journey that in Earth time lasts 80 years, at near the speed of light lasts only a couple of months. Like, yeah, I think a few months. And so Jan can make the journey. He plans to put himself in a drug-induced coma for most of it, so that he's not relying on a lot of food to sustain him, and also that he's not going crazy by having to stay cooped up in this little pod for months. And so it's a drug-induced hibernation, essentially. But he also knows that even if he does do this, even if he succeeds, everybody on Earth will be long dead. Everybody on Earth that he knows will be long dead. But he decides, I don't really get along with my family. I don't get along with my sister. There's really not much keeping me here. So I'm going to do it. So he puts the plan in place. Everything goes perfectly according to plan. He's in the whale sculpture. He's in the pod. It goes onto the ship, and the ship takes off to the Overlords' homeworld. And as soon as it's gone, Corellin addresses humanity in one of his few press conferences to tell them, we've got a stowaway on one of our ships. He's known the whole time, and he's letting him go. But he also says, no one else is going to be able to do this. And then he has to sort of explain things to the human race, because there is like a little bit of animosity, because the sense of adventure is gone. Therefore, there is no space exploration. And while humanity has the Overlord's technology for traveling around Earth and even to the moon and back and setting up colonies there, there is no deep space travel. Nobody's going to Mars. Nobody's going to Pluto. Nobody's going even further than that. And Corellin explains, the universe is too big for you. Like, one day, maybe, with the right technology and the right evolution, you could control one or two of the planets in your solar system. Maybe even a lot of them, but you will never have the capacity to go out beyond the stars. What does he say? I believe he says, the stars are not for man. And tries to put the kibosh on whatever stirrings of adventure Jan's Stowaway might have inspired. And so Jan is gone, and then we go back to George and Jean. They've gotten married, and they have a kid, and George is very unhappy in his life because he doesn't feel there's a lot of appreciation for the creative arts anymore in human society, because the Overlords have pretty much just taken that love of creativity out of us. But he knows that there's a special colony. That's an artistic community that's been set up independently of the Overlords, and it's called New Athens. And he convinces Jean to move the family there so that they can sort of live a more human life. Like, they have to make their own food. They have their own jobs. They're part of a community. They're working together for each other rather than sitting around doing nothing while the overlords provide everything. And like, you can sort of tell there's like a 1950s sensibility here when he starts talking about or the guy who founded New Athens talks about just how sedentary the human race has become. When it comes to like entertainments, we're just mass consumers of entertainment at this point. And these are the stats he uses. Over 500 hours of material are broadcast every day, and people on average watch television or consume entertainment for 3.5 hours per day, which apparently in the 1950s is one of the most ludicrous and untenable statistics you can possibly imagine. Today, we go way, way, way beyond that. Oh. So I found that to be pretty hilarious. Just reading like those statistics, and those are like the sci-fi worst case scenario statistics from the 1950s. So let that sink in for a bit. Aravandi saying, yeah, that setup wouldn't work for me. I'm a knitting and crochet addict. Ain't no overlord can stop me. You and many people I know, Aravandi. And Temple says, yeah, today we have Netflix binges. Yep. Yes, we do. We can go way more than 3.5 hours per day watching TV. We probably shouldn't, but we do. So George and Jean go to New Athens, and start to build a new life for themselves. And they're very happy. I mean, there's a period of adjustment, but they're very happy. Their son Jacob is really into it. He's having a ball. He's loving life. George is loving life. Jean is a little bit more resistant to it, but she's coming around to it. They have a new daughter named Jennifer, I think. Jennifer or Jenny. Mostly they just call her the Poppet. But she's a newborn. She's an infant. And they're living a good life, and New Athens is on an island in the South Pacific. It's like around a dead volcano. This plays a part later on. And so there's one day an underwater earthquake happens, which triggers a tsunami, and Jacob is out just enjoying the day, and he sees the ocean starting to recede, and he doesn't know what this means, and all he can see is that all these things that have been covered up by the ocean are now visible, and he just runs out to see them. He's like, oh, I'm getting to see all these new cool things. And of course, we know what's about to happen. And it's at this point that a voice calls out to Jacob and tells him, you need to get out of here right now. And it's a disembodied voice. He doesn't know who it is. But it's very commanding, and so he follows it. And there's a point where he's running back to the beach, and he comes across a rock that he can't get around. And the voice says, close your eyes and hold your hand up out in front of you. And so Jacob says, okay, don't know why, but okay. And he does, and there's a bit of a flash, and when he opens his eyes again, the rock is gone. And so he And so he's able to keep going. The rock has somehow become vaporized. We can sort of guess what's going on here. He's being led by an overlord, which says that he's being monitored, which means he is therefore important in some way. And so, and it's at this point that the overlords, who have really sort of let New Athens do its own thing without any intervention or anything like that, and and then they send down an overlord to just sort of look over things. Like, he's not trying to stop anything. He's not trying to intervene on anything. He's just satisfying some curiosity. And at this point, George has heard the story from Jacob about what happened, and he knows that somehow the overlords were involved in saving his life, and he wants to talk to this overlord about that. He wants to know why was his son deemed so important that they had to intervene in saving his life. And this overlord, whose name I can't remember, he doesn't really play a very big part except for this. He deliberately avoids George in order to not talk to him about this, and then goes back to Corellin. And from there, they have another conversation, and we can determine from that conversation that this guy was there primarily to look in on the Gregson family in a very subtle way that their monitoring devices can't do. So whatever is going on, the Gregsons are playing a big role in whatever these plans are. And so where do we go from here? So everything sort of dies down until strange things start happening. Jacob starts having weird dreams. He starts seeing strange alien landscapes in his dreams. And Corellin and the Overlords are monitoring this, and they're hearing him talk about this, and they see that what he is describing in his dreams are the surfaces of real planets that they have been to and cataloged in the past. And to Corellin, this is something that they were expecting. This is something that they were planning for. And so they know that now it's only a matter of time. And the dreams start getting more vivid. They start coming more often. Meanwhile, their daughter is starting to demonstrate certain psychic abilities. Like, she's able to perform telekinesis as an infant, and it's really kind of frightening. And when this happens, that's when Corellin finally intervenes, finally comes down, and tells humanity the final truth, the reason for why they're here. And it is for this. And again, this is another big spoiler. They have been here on Earth this whole time, coaxing humanity in order to create the right set of circumstances for a very specific type of evolution to happen. And that is a psychic evolution. An evolution of the mind. And this is a different kind of evolution than what we're used to, which is slow and gradual over years. This is something that happens almost instantaneously. And so at this point, he describes it as like growing crystals around like a little nucleus. Like, once the reaction starts, it may take a while for the reaction to start, but once it starts, it blossoms out in a big way. And so what we begin to see is that most of the children on the planet, usually from the ages of like 5 to 15, suddenly go into something of a catatonic state. And what they are doing is they are evolving into a new species, a new psychic species. And the Overlords came here specifically at the time they did, for reasons that we've been misinterpreting all these years. It's been readily assumed that the Overlords came because humanity had harnessed the power of atomic energy and we're going to start using it like a weapon. And that the Overlords came specifically to stop that. When in actuality, they came because we were starting to delve into parapsychology in more practical ways. And unless we do that, if we do that unsupervised, we risk a very large catastrophe that doesn't just take out Earth, but can take out lots of different planets. And Suzanne is saying it's like a lot like the end of 2001. And yeah, actually, I'll get into the 2001 connection in a little bit, but there is a certain similarity there. Yes. So yeah, they're talking about 2001 in the chat now, and I'm gonna mention the 2001 connection once I finish this, because we're getting to the end here. So the children of the Earth are going into this sort of chrysalis state, and Corellin basically tells humanity, this is the end of the race of Homo sapiens. You are the last generation. And in fact, the title of the third part is The Last Generation. Now it is possible, and he says, I understand that you don't want to hear this and you're going to resist it. Therefore, we're going to take these children off of the planet just for a little bit in order for you to settle yourselves and calm yourselves. And so they do that, and it's kind of like Close Encounters of the Third Kind a little bit, like lots of children going into these ships to be taken off of Earth, and now the rest of humanity has to deal with the fact that we're the last, we're the end. And so no, I think Suzanne was saying they were talking about childhood trauma of 2001 and Silent Running, and Temple says both by the same author, and Temple was mentioning 2001 and Childhood's End, not 2001 and Silent Running. The people like George and Jean and the people of New Athens decide we don't want to fade out. We'd rather just end, and so they opt to destroy the island. And they do that by reigniting the volcano with a little nuclear fuel. And so that's why I say the dead volcano comes into play again. They basically opt to destroy themselves. At least New Athens does. There are other people who want to who aren't as willing to sort of end themselves, and they want to stick around. And it's a very sad ending, because you have humanity basically saying, well, okay, this is it. Might as well throw in the towel for all of human history. Um, and so this is what happens, and then we flash forward to Jan's storyline, because he's still on his way to the Overlord homeworld and eventually on his way back. And he does make it to the Overlord homeworld, and it's as alien as anybody could possibly imagine, because the Overlords have wings and can fly. All of their structures are designed around beings that can fly, so there are no sidewalks, there are no bridges or walkways. There's simply currents of air between buildings. Um, and so this is a very eye opening situation for Jan, and he realizes just how unprepared for the universe humanity really is, and can kind of see why the Overlords have been shielding them this whole time. And eventually, after he makes friends with an Overlord who is one of the few who can speak his language, because these are the Overlords who are not part of the Earth mission. These are just Overlords at home. Most of them can't speak English, but he's able to meet up with one named Vindarton, who can speak some English, and they begin to try to communicate with each other and get to know each other, and he sort of becomes Jan's guide for a while. But as things progress, Jan realizes he wants to go back home. He doesn't know what's been going on Earth. He, even though he knows that it'll be 80 years into his future, everybody he knows will be long dead, he still expects humanity to still be there, and for Earth to still be there, and for him to sort of reacclimate to life, or to reacclimate to a life that is probably a bit more familiar than the Overlord's world is. And so, so he goes on a ship. He goes on a ship and goes back to Earth, and it's there that everything comes out to him finally. He meets with Corellin and Rashaveric, and they tell him what has happened, that humanity has evolved, the children have been taken away, and now they've been brought back, now that humanity has sort of kind of sorted itself out a little bit, and they've isolated them, I think, to Australia. And so the children are now testing out their new abilities and what they've become, and because they are no longer human now. They're something else. And Corellin starts to basically tells him the story of the Overlords, which is, and every species reaches this point where they will evolve into this next stage. But in order to do that, they have to cross a very narrow bridge, and that's what this jump is. And if they do it wrong, they can destroy themselves and a lot of worlds around them. And odds are, without guidance, they won't do it right. And so that's what the Overlords have been there for. And the Overlords have been doing this because they can't achieve it themselves. They weren't their species wasn't able to cross that bridge, and so they're sort of at an evolutionary dead end. They're as evolved as they're ever going to be, and what they have been contacted by this entity that all these other more evolved beings become a part of, which they call the Overmind. And the Overmind is sort of like this great consciousness, and it's the one that sort of that gives the Overlords their marching orders, and they were told go to Earth and help coax them into the next stage. And this is something they've done before. They've done it 5 times already, or I think Earth is the 5th one, maybe. But because the Overlords can never achieve it themselves, they spend a lot of time studying this process and studying what goes into it. And at this point, humanity, like you and me, the last generation, they've kind of devolved, and pretty much wiped themselves out. So there are no more humans on Earth. There are only these children who are part of this, who are evolving into this Overmind entity. Aravandi's asking, like the Borg. Kind of like the Borg, but not in such a forceful and cybernetic way. Like, this is part of a natural evolution, and what is actually happening is that the children are evolving into a point where they can shed their mortal being and become just thought and energy. And that's sort of what they're doing now on Earth. They're testing their abilities. They're taking in the energy of the Earth to feed themselves, and Jan is sort of the last man standing. He is the last human, and the Overlords, they never ask him, but he volunteers. He says, okay, humanity is gone. Eventually these children are going to be gone. I'd just like to stay here on Earth and live out my days here. And the Overlords say, we were kind of hoping you would say that, because we'd like you to send us messages about what you see and what you encounter. Sort of give us your first-hand look. Because at some point, they're going to leave, and they could destroy the Earth with them. And Jan is at the point now where he's like, I'm okay with that. I've seen everything in this world that I want to see. I've seen everything in this universe that I want to see. And so he sets himself up, lives a very last man on Earth kind of life, just sort of doing whatever, and sending regular messages to the Overlords. They've left monitoring equipment, but part of their deal with the Overmind is that they cannot interfere in this stage of the evolution in any way. All they can do is monitor. And so that's what they've done. But now they have somebody on Earth who can relay first-hand experiences of what's going on to them. So it's sort of like a new perspective. And Jan agrees to do this. And for a while, nothing is happening. Like a few weird things happen. Like they begin to they shift the orbit of the moon, and it causes some various gravitational shifts on Earth, but nothing too major. They're very good at manipulating matter. They instantaneously wipe out all the life in Australia aside from themselves, just so that they can spread out, and they work and move as a collective. Like, there is no more individuality amongst them. They're part of a much larger mind. And as Jan is dictating to the Overlords what he's seeing, he sees that they're beginning to leave. Like they're beginning to shoot off of the earth in this giant beam of light. They're beginning the last process of their evolution and joining the Overmind, and they're using up all the energy of the earth to do it. Every single atom on earth. And so what he sees is that while they're leaving, everything on earth is becoming sort of transparent. It's basically fizzling away. And that's and his last message is describing as they're fizzling away, as they're leaving and the earth is fizzling into nothing, it releases all the energy stored up in the earth's core and basically explodes out into nothing. And that's the end of earth, and that's the end of humanity. And the last chapter is actually like it's heartbreaking to me, because what you have is humanity doing something that even humanity never knew it was capable of doing, and evolving into something so much greater than we ever could have imagined. All the while being watched by somebody who is never going to have that. And like there's a whole section here towards the end where we just have a transcript of Jan's messages to Corellin at the end. And there's one point here where I'm trying to find it here. Yeah, here it is. This is his last message to Corellin. He says, "Only a few seconds away. There go the mountains like wisps of smoke. Goodbye, Corellin, Rashaveric. I am sorry for you. Though I cannot understand it, I've seen what my race became. Everything we ever achieved has gone up there into the stars. Perhaps that's what the old religions were trying to say, but they got it all wrong. They thought mankind was so important, yet we're only one race, and do you know how many? And yet now we've become something that you could never be." And so Jan is very accepting of this, and this is I'm gonna read the last section after the earth dissolves into nothing. The Overlords have left Earth and they're heading back home. They've been receiving Jan's messages this whole time. So this is where we are. 6,000 million kilometers beyond the orbit of Pluto, Corellin sat before a suddenly darkened screen. The record was complete. The mission ended. He was homeward bound for the world he had left so long ago. The weight of centuries was upon him, and a sadness that no logic could dispel. He did not mourn for man. His sorrow was for his own race, forever barred from greatness by forces it could not overcome. For all their achievements, thought Corellin, for all their mastery of the physical universe, his people were no better than a tribe that has passed its whole existence upon some flat and dusty plain. Far off were the mountains where power and beauty dwelt, where the thunder sported above the glaciers and the air was clear and keen. There the sun still walked, transfiguring the peaks with glory, yet when all the land below was wrapped in darkness, and they could only watch and wonder, they could never scale those heights. Yet Corellin knew he would hold fast until the end. They would wait until their despair. They would await without despair whatever destiny was theirs. They would serve the Overmind because they had no choice. But even in that service, they would not lose their souls. The great control screen flared for a moment with somber ruby light. Without conscious effort, Corellin read the messages of its changing patterns. The ship was leaving the frontiers of the solar system. The energies that powered the star drive were ebbing fast, but they had done their work. Corellin raised his hand, and the picture changed once more. A single, brilliant star glowed in the center of the screen. No one could have told from this distance that the sun had ever possessed planets or that one of them had now been lost. For a long time, Corellin stared back across that swiftly widening gulf, while many memories raced through his vast and labyrinthine mind. In silent farewell, he saluted the men he had known, whether they had hindered or helped him in his purpose. No one dared disturb him or interrupt him in his thoughts, and presently he turned his back upon the dwindling sun. So that's the end of Childhood's End. And it really is kind of I think you could say that it's a depressing story, because the central message of it is that we have absolutely no control over our fate, that as much as we try to make our own destiny, to control our own lives, we still exist in a universe so vast that we can't comprehend it, and that there are powers that control it so beyond our own imagination that we can't do anything to fight them. And we shouldn't fight them, because they are helping us to evolve into something greater. They're helping us to become part of this greater universe. And so it really is like a story about about destiny and about self-determination, and it really is like sort of taking a very hard look at how much we think we control and how little we actually do control. And it's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, especially in this day and age where we really do rely very heavily on our own self-determination. And we do benefit from that, because we do live in a world where we can control our own destinies, at least as far as our own existence on this planet goes. Our existence beyond that is something we still don't understand. And I mean, Childhood's End is just one of many stories that tries to conquer that, or that tries to explore that vast beyond. And it's heartbreaking sometimes to like read a story and know as you're reading it that this is very likely what it's like for us, that we occupy this very, very tiny space in a very, very huge universe. And to think that we, in our stage of evolution where we are now, that we can control anything beyond this tiny speck that we're on is ludicrous. But that's where our imaginations go. That's where our ambitions go. And it's I don't like to believe that like we really are like existing simply as a quirk of fate, or on the whim of something else that we just can't even comprehend. But I mean, odds are there probably is something out there much greater than us that probably doesn't even know about us at this point. That And what is Temple saying here? I love science fiction that shows how small we are in the big scheme of things. I like it too. It's humbling. Um, it it's a very bizarre form of a reality check, where we like it sort of provides a step back to realize that we are not even close to the center of the universe. That um, if anybody is familiar with Carl Sagan's "Pale Blue Dot" speech um, from the series Cosmos, um, probably one of the most powerful speeches that I've ever encountered, and it speaks a lot to that, about how uh, all of humanity, all of our history, everything that we have ever achieved, everything we've created and or destroyed has happened on this tiny little speck in the universe. Something so tiny that if it were wiped out tomorrow, nobody else in the universe would even know it existed, would ever know that we were even here. And that's a truly humbling thought, that we are all of the things that we have in our lives, that all the things that we know are all part of this tiny infinitesimal corner. And we like to think that we know so much more than we do, or that we have such a great understanding of the universe, when the truth is it is impossible for us to really have a very strong understanding of anything in the universe. We can guess, we can observe and draw conclusions that may or may not be right or wrong. We don't know. Um, but there are so many other things in the universe that are so beyond our comprehension. Like we don't know what's on the other side of a black hole. We don't know if you can even get to a black hole. Um, we've only we've only just recently discovered that black holes, while theoretical, up until just a few years ago, we've never seen one that actually existed. And so all we can do is really guess. And that's sort of why I've become such a big fan of science fiction, because it's very much this kind of check on what we think we know, and postulating, well, maybe it's this. I mean, honestly, the Overlords and the Overmind is as good a theory of what's actually out there in the universe than anything else that we've encountered, or anything else that I can think of. And because we really don't know. It could be the Overmind. It could be something else entirely. It could be there's actually nothing, and that nobody really gets past this stage of evolution where we are. And that's why we don't encounter other species. I mean, who knows? But that that's why I really like this book, because it got me thinking, and it got me any book that makes you think is a good book, in my opinion. And it really made me uh, ponder our fate and our destiny and our place in the universe. And even when we are part of something so much greater than us, like in this book, how we are how we do evolve into something much greater. But the part of humanity that we are, Homo sapiens, like you and me, we're still left behind. We're still not a part of that. Uh, so it's very it's a very powerful and humbling and moving idea, and it's something I usually like to explore in my own writings. Um, just how insignificant we are, how much of the universe we don't understand, Like, what is Temple saying here? It goes past mere entertainment and enters into philosophy when reading a book that makes you think. Yeah, and it does, and this is why I recommend Childhood's End so intensely, and why I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with the miniseries. There are clearly some changes that I can see from the trailer. For instance, Stormgren is not the UN Secretary General who is close to retirement. He is a Midwestern farmer, um, trying to play up that whole everyman angle, I guess. Um, it looks like they've changed the Gregsons a bit. They've changed their dynamic a little bit. Um, uh, Wainwright, the leader of the resistance movement in the beginning, is actually the head of a media conglomerate in this version, which I think is a pretty good update of that. Um, but whether or not they will actually like go go to the lengths that this book does to sort of show like the end and the evolution, I really don't know. I don't know if sci-fi has the guts to show something like that, because it is one of those things that uh, it it moves you and it can scare you, and it's also not a very happy ending, at least for us, because we're wiped out to the point where even Earth doesn't exist anymore, and nobody in the universe other than the Overlords are ever even going to know that it existed, and that alone is an honor that most species are never going to have. That there will be another species out there in the universe that knew you were here, and right now we're at the stage where we don't even have that, and that's one of the things that I think about a lot is just how small we are in the grand scheme of the universe, and how little control we have over so many things, which is why I feel it's important for us to hang on to the things that we can control in our own lives, and not just say, screw it, world could end tomorrow, what can I do about it? It could end tomorrow, it may not, and then what are you going to do with your life? And so it's I always feel that it's important to shape your own life and to control the things that you can, because there are a billion other things in this world and in this universe that you can't control, that you have absolutely no part in controlling. And so that's why I feel it's important. Take hold of your life, make it the best you can, because that's the thing that you can control, and that's the thing that makes you able to create that sense of I was here. And I'm getting way deep and philosophical about it now, but that um, that's sort of my takeaway from Childhood's End. Now we had mentioned earlier a connection to 2001, more than just the fact that Childhood's End and 2001 were written by the same guy. Um, it actually turns out that the movie 2001, which was a collaboration between Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick, um, was it actually began with Kubrick going to Clarke to try to adapt Childhood's End into a movie. It instead turned into a 2001, but it has a lot of the same themes of evolution. And I think it was Suzanne who mentioned how similar the ending of Childhood's End kind of is to the ending of 2001, and that's not by accident. Um, so that's that connection. But yeah, so I'm going to end this discussion here because we're at about an hour and 45 minutes with this. So it's been a very long discussion. I've just spoiled the entire book of Childhood's End for you. So I still recommend reading it. I still think it's a very good book if you haven't read it yet. So we will be back on the Silmarillion next week, finally. I do apologize for the longer than intended break and all the false starts that we had with it. But we're going to get back into it, and we're going to have a big episode next week with 3 chapters covering a lot of ground, a lot of story. And since this is a new month that will start tomorrow, we also have a new book of the month for June. Now, we've done some sci-fi, some pretty heady sci-fi too, I might add. I wanted to do something that's a bit more fantastical, but I thought we should also do something that is also rather nostalgic, something that we all can recognize. And so for this and for July, our 2 books are going to be somewhat fantastical books that were adapted into movies that are generally considered childhood favorites for people of my generation, of like the Gen Xers and the Gen Ys and the Millennials. And so, with that in mind, the book of the month for June is The Never-Ending Story by Michael Ende. It's a good book. I know many of you have probably seen the movie more than have read the book. The movie is probably only about the first third of this book, which is ironic considering that the movie actually has 2 sequels, neither of which have much to do with what happens in the rest of the book. So it's going to be... I won't say it's lighthearted. It gets pretty heavy towards the end. But it is a really good book. I really enjoyed it. I know most of us, like, I'm sure for most of you, as soon as I mentioned the title, the song started playing in your head. What is Temple saying? I love that there was that person who sued the movie makers because the movie ended. I didn't realize that was a thing that happened. But oh, I stole the One Ring. It says her stream froze. The book is The Never-Ending Story. That's going to be our book of the month for June. And I would say if you haven't read it, definitely read it. If you haven't seen the movie, see the movie. The movie is really good. The first one. The other 2 are god-awful. But the first movie is very well done. I really enjoyed it. So that's going to be it for this week. Again, we're back on the Silmarillion next week with 3 chapters of the return of the Noldor, of Beleriand and its realms, and of the Noldor in Beleriand. And there's going to be some big developments with Fingolfin, with Maethros, with Thingol, and yes, even with Galadriel. So yeah, thank you for watching me wax philosophical and romantical about sci-fi and Childhood's End. There was another thing I wanted to bring up before we come to the end here. I've noticed that a lot of and this was partially intentional, partially unintentional, a number of the books of the month that I've selected over time have been are being adapted into new movies or new miniseries, such as Childhood's End, which is becoming a miniseries in December. There's The Martian, which is going to be a movie in November. There's Ready Player One, which was just announced is going to be a movie directed by Steven Spielberg in the next couple of years. And so I wanted to run this past those of you in the chat who are here with us, whether or not you'd be interested in seeing us talk about the adaptations of these books as they happen, having read them, if you've read them. Because I think I find adaptations to be very interesting. Some are good, some are not so good. But it usually brings an interesting perspective, because what you're seeing is is somebody's specific interpretation of this story. So in November, I may take some time to talk about the upcoming movie of The Martian when it comes out. Temple saying it might be cool to have a 10 to 20 minute update when the adaptations come out. Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm thinking. I mean, I don't want to do I don't want to do a full episode about it, but just like talking about what I liked, what I didn't like, how I might have done it differently. Because I find adaptations to be very, very an interesting look into how other people have interpreted what you've read. And Ava is saying, I can't wait for the Ready Player One movie. I hope it's going to be really good. I do too. I've got high hopes for Ready Player One. But that's probably like a year or two away from now. But okay, so that'll do it for us. We're about to hit 2 hours. So I will see you all next week with a big Silmarillion episode, and we're gonna be barreling through this Silmarillion because I still want to keep us on track for August 30th being the last episode. So expect a couple big episodes just to keep us on track. So thank you for participating in this discussion of Childhood's End. And next month, we'll be talking The Never-Ending Story. And I will see you all then. Have a great week, everybody, and never stop reading.